Louis leaned forward, his voice dripping with smugness. "We wanted you to know now so there's no confusion later. Everything goes to us." My brother's words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut, and suddenly the homemade lasagna on my plate, the one Mom promised would lure me home, felt like lead in my stomach. For a moment, the dining room grew silent, except for the distant hum of traffic beyond the suburban cul-de-sac. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared across the polished cherrywood table at Louis and Layla, my younger twin siblings. Both were smirking now, their eyes glittering with self-satisfaction. "Excuse me?" My voice shook despite my efforts to steady it. "What do you mean by everything?" "Exactly what he said." "Sarah," Mom interjected sharply. Her smile had faded, replaced by a defiant set of her lips. "Your father and I have decided to finalize our will, and we wanted you to hear it directly from us. The house, the lake cottage, all of it is going to Louis and Layla." I turned to Dad, hoping for some sign of hesitation, some indication that this was a cruel joke or misunderstanding. But his gaze was fixed on the silverware in front of him, avoiding my eyes altogether. The silence that followed stretched painfully until he finally spoke, his voice quiet and carefully controlled. "Sarah, you have to understand our reasoning," Dad said, folding his hands slowly. "You've done extremely well for yourself. Your mother and I are proud of your career and the success you've built. Louis and Layla, well, they're still finding their footing. They need more support." I blinked hard, fighting the hot sting of tears. Support. For years, I had quietly shouldered the family's financial burdens, believing it was my duty as the oldest child. Their house payments, Louis's endless tuition changes, Layla's whims and costly hobbies, all quietly covered by me. Apparently, none of it counted for anything. My heart twisted bitterly as I looked at my parents' faces. Their expressions hardened against me. It was a betrayal, sharper than I had ever anticipated. "So this is my reward for spending the last 4 years paying your mortgage?" I demanded, my voice low but firm. "For the tuition bills. The $30,000 I put into renovating that lake cottage last summer. You're leaving me nothing because I made something of myself?" Mom sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "This is exactly why we didn't want to tell you. You always bring it back to money, Sarah. It's never about family with you." Heat surged into my cheeks, my fists clenched beneath the tablecloth. "It was always about family for me," I countered. "Every sacrifice I've made was because of family. Because you asked, Mom. Because you said family sticks together." Louis scoffed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms smugly. "You're acting like some martyr. Nobody forced you to help. You just liked playing the hero." Layla laughed quietly, twirling a strand of her shiny hair around one finger, eyes narrowed with amusement. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us?" The cruelty of her words stung deep, reopening a wound I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. My parents didn't react. They didn't reprimand her. Their silence was louder than any defense they might have mounted. They'd always indulged Louis and Layla, protected them, excused every irresponsible choice. Yet here I sat after years of sacrifice, being painted as greedy and selfish. Anger flared through me, scorching away the last threads of patience. "You're right, Louis," I finally said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "No one forced me, but from today onward, no one can guilt me into being this family's ATM either. I'm done." I pushed my chair back and stood abruptly, ignoring the surprised looks on their faces for a second. The scent of marinara and baked garlic lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of what I'd foolishly hoped would be a comforting family evening. Instead, I'd been ambushed, humiliated, and rejected in the same home I helped pay for. As I grabbed my coat from the hallway, the front door swung shut behind me with a definitive thud, cutting me off from the voices inside. Voices that no longer mattered. Outside, the cool Portland air hit me sharply, helping clear my head, but my heart still felt raw, aching with disbelief. My own family had used me, discarded me, and left me feeling worthless. I climbed into my car and slammed the door shut, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands as tears finally escaped down my face. During the silent, lonely drive back to my downtown apartment, memories flooded my mind. Each financial sacrifice, each canceled vacation. Every night I'd spent weeks juggling spreadsheets and payments to ensure they stayed comfortable. All of it was done silently, without complaint, out of a misguided sense of love and obligation. How naive I had been, believing my efforts were appreciated, let alone valued. Back home, my apartment felt strangely unfamiliar now, as if everything around me was tainted by this revelation. I poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet, the expensive one I'd saved for special occasions. Somehow, tonight's bitter lessons seemed fitting enough. Settling onto my couch, I opened my banking app. The recurring monthly payments, $1,800 labeled Parents' Mortgage. Another $600 for their utility bills stood out glaringly from the screen. Without hesitation, I canceled them both. A quiet defiance bubbled through my chest as the confirmations flashed. As the evening faded into night, I replayed the dinner conversation obsessively, my anger giving way to deep sadness. The rejection wasn't just financial. It was emotional. A lifetime of feeling second best was finally confirmed openly. Yet even amidst the hurt, something new stirred within me. A sense of liberation, a realization that my worth wasn't defined by their acceptance. It was time to reclaim my own life, free from expectations and obligations that had become chains around my spirit. I knew my parents, Louis and Layla, wouldn't let this go quietly. There would be calls, arguments, perhaps even retaliation. But tonight marked a turning point. No matter how hard they pushed back, I vowed silently to myself that I was done being their victim, done quietly accepting disrespect under the guise of duty. From this moment forward, my life was my own. And as I drained the last drop of wine from my glass, I found myself smiling bitterly into the darkness. My family had invited me home to announce they'd left everything to Louis and Layla, but they'd given me something far more valuable tonight. Freedom. Sleep eluded me that night. I stared up at the shadowy ceiling of my apartment. My mind was spinning through an endless loop of disbelief, hurt, and anger. The city lights outside flickered softly through my curtains, indifferent to the turmoil consuming me. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived those humiliating moments around the dinner table. The smugness on Louis's face, the amused contempt in Layla's eyes, and, worst of all, the stony silence from my parents. Their silence cut deeper than my siblings' barbed words ever could. By sunrise, exhaustion had drained me of tears. I dragged myself out of bed, brewed strong coffee, and sat numbly at my kitchen table. The morning news murmured softly in the background, but I wasn't listening. Instead, memories pressed in from every corner, relentless in their clarity. Had I been blind all these years, Or had I willingly ignored the signs, desperate to believe that my family valued me for more than just the financial security I provided? My phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating harshly against the wooden table. It was Mom. My stomach twisted into knots, and I let it go to voicemail, unwilling, or maybe unable, to hear her voice. So soon? A minute later, the voicemail notification blinked impatiently. Against better judgment, I played it. "Sarah, please stop being so dramatic." Her voice echoed a familiar mixture of exasperation and guilt. "Call me back. You know, family doesn't treat each other like this." A hollow laugh escaped my lips. How ironic. Family. Her favorite weapon of emotional manipulation? Family only mattered when it justified their needs. Never mind. I deleted the message and set the phone aside, determined not to crumble beneath her practiced guilt trips. Over the following days, the calls multiplied. First Mom, then Dad. Finally, Louis and Layla chimed in, alternating between condescending lectures and sarcastic pleas. But none of their voices held even a shred of remorse, only mounting irritation that their financial lifeline had abruptly vanished. Finally, after a particularly bitter call from Layla accusing me of selfishness and jealousy, I blocked them all. Peace fell over me for the first time in years, fragile and unfamiliar, yet beneath the quiet relief simmered a dull, persistent ache. One I wasn't sure would ever fade completely. I threw myself into work as a distraction. Bennett Construction's latest project, a sleek medical office complex in Sacramento, demanded my full attention. Meetings, blueprints, client walkthroughs, all things I'd always handled with grace now felt like desperate escapes from the reality waiting for me outside office hours. I extended my workdays, volunteered for extra travel, anything to delay facing the emptiness of my newly quiet evenings. 3 weeks passed without direct contact from my family. I began cautiously hoping they'd accepted my decision and moved on. But deep down, I knew better. It was Friday afternoon when the text came flashing ominously across my screen. "Family meeting tonight. Sarah, you owe it to us to be there." My heart rate spiked. I stared at the message, disbelief warring with outrage. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore, but curiosity mixed, perhaps with a misguided hope for reconciliation, gnawed at me. Before I could overthink it, my fingers typed a single-word reply. "Fine." Pulling into my parents' driveway that evening felt surreal. Louis's flashy motorcycle and Layla's obnoxiously blue Kia were already there, parked side by side like matching symbols of entitlement. Dread twisted sharply in my gut as I approached the familiar front door, now feeling as foreign and unwelcoming as an enemy's fortress. Mom opened the door, her forced smile barely masking irritation. "Sarah, glad you decided to come," she said stiffly, ushering me into the house I once thought of as home. "Daisy's here too." My Aunt Daisy sat quietly in the corner of the living room, her eyes warm with sympathy but wary. Her presence surprised me. She rarely got involved in family conflicts. I took a seat across from her, heart racing as my siblings entered the room, openly glaring. Dad cleared his throat. "We called this meeting to clear the air. Sarah," he began sternly, "your mother and I thought you'd see reason by now. Obviously, we were mistaken." I bit back a sharp retort, clenching my fists tightly. "See? Reason." My voice shook despite efforts to control it. "You cut me out completely after everything I've done for you. Every mortgage payment, every tuition check. And you want me to see reason. Stop exaggerating, Mom snapped, rolling her eyes. You helped, sure, but it was your responsibility as the oldest. Louis and Layla deserve stability. It's not our fault you chose work over family. A bitter laugh burst from my lips. I chose work over family? I echoed incredulously. I built my career because you needed my money. I skipped vacations, friendships, relationships, all so you could maintain this illusion of security. Oh, spare us the dramatics, Louis scoffed. We never asked for your pity, Charity. That's right, Layla sneered. Maybe if you weren't so busy being the family's savior, you'd have your own life by now. Heat flooded my face, humiliation swelling painfully beneath my skin. Aunt Daisy shifted uneasily but said nothing, her silence as loud as a scream. My parents remained silent, faces stony, eyes turned away from me once again. I stood abruptly, chair scraping harshly across the hardwood floor. You know what? You're right. It was my mistake to believe I mattered here. I won't make that mistake again. As I reached the door, Dad's voice cut sharply behind me. If you walk out now, Sarah, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused, my hand gripping the doorknob. A lifetime of suppressed anger finally bubbling to the surface. That's fine, I replied coldly, my voice shaking with controlled fury. I've never felt welcome here anyway. Outside, beneath the cold stars, tears burned hot trails down my cheeks. Each step toward my car felt heavier than the last, the realization finally sinking in. My family never truly valued me. I was merely convenient, disposable, replaceable. At home, I locked my apartment door firmly behind me, determined never to let them hurt me again. I sat in darkness, the silence now strangely comforting, wrapping around me like a protective shield. A quiet knock on my door startled me, sending adrenaline coursing through my veins. Cautiously, I peered through the peephole. Aunt Daisy stood there, worry etched deeply on her face. Opening the door, I let her in wordlessly. She immediately embraced me, warmth and comfort radiating from her gentle hold. I'm sorry, Sarah, Daisy whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They're wrong. You deserve so much better. The words cracked something inside me, and the tears I had held back flowed freely. Daisy held me tightly, allowing me to release years of pent-up pain and bitterness. After a long silence, she finally spoke again, her voice filled with conviction. They won't ever admit it, but they're scared. Scared of losing control, of facing their mistakes. Years of being treated as an asset, $1,800 for my parents' mortgage, $600 for utilities and bills, plus countless miscellaneous transfers labeled simply family help. My cursor hovered over the cancel button, my breath shallow and uneven despite my anger and humiliation. Guilt twisted painfully in my gut, whispering old lies of responsibility and obligation. I hesitated, my mother's voice echoing in my mind. Family sticks together, Sarah. Family sacrifices. Yet tonight had stripped away all illusions. Their betrayal, dismissive and callous, revealed the stark truth. I'd become nothing more than their financial convenience. I squeezed my eyes shut, Louis's mocking smirk flashing vividly through my memory, crystallizing my decision in painful clarity. With one decisive click, the mortgage payment vanished. Another click, and the utilities payment stopped too. Relief surged through me immediately, a rush so intense it left me breathless. For the first time in years, I was no longer their lifeline. The chains had finally fallen. Exhaustion eventually overcame me, and when I woke up on the couch, dawn had softened Portland's skyline into shades of pale lavender and gold. My phone buzzed insistently, jolting me awake. Dread pooled instantly in my stomach. Unsurprisingly, my mother's name flashed across the screen. I took a steadying breath before answering. "Sarah, what have you done?" she demanded, skipping any greeting. Her voice quivered with rage. "The bank called. They're threatening foreclosure. You had no right." "No right?" I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm. "Mom, I paid your mortgage voluntarily, but after what happened, I'm done being your financial crutch." "You're our daughter!" she shrieked. "You owe us respect!" "I owe you nothing," I countered sharply, anger igniting again. "Respect isn't one-sided. You made your choice. Now I've made mine." "Sarah," she began again, desperation leaking into her tone, but I cut her off firmly. "I'm sorry you're upset, Mom, but I can't do this anymore. Goodbye." I hung up quickly, my hands trembling. The calls didn't stop. Each one, from Dad, Layla, even distant relatives, was a relentless attempt to manipulate, guilt-trip, or shame me back into submission. Eventually, I silenced my phone, feeling oddly empowered by the quiet rebellion. Weeks passed, and life slowly regained balance. Work became not just a distraction, but genuinely fulfilling again. I booked the trip to Italy I'd dreamed about for years, savoring the freedom to finally spend my hard-earned money on myself. A new sense of independence filled my days, though loneliness occasionally crept in at night, a harsh reminder of family ties severed. Then came Sacramento, a 3-day trip to oversee final inspections at our newest medical complex project. The assignment felt perfectly timed, a welcome escape from lingering sadness and family drama. Returning late on a Friday evening, fatigue pressed heavily on my shoulders as I approached my apartment door, luggage in tow. But something was wrong. The closer I came, the clearer I saw it. Thick, hardened foam expanding grotesquely around my doorframe. My heart dropped. My apartment was completely sealed shut, heart pounding. Stomach knotted with nerves. Who would go so far as to seal me out of my own home? The obvious candidate was Louis. His tendency for petty revenge was well known, but this was something new. I immediately called a locksmith and decided to check the hallway security camera footage to confirm my suspicions. As the locksmith worked on the hardened foam, I checked the recordings. What I saw only strengthened my resolve. Louis in a hoodie, yet his walk and smug grin unmistakable as he worked with the foam at my door. It was a direct challenge, to prove he could still control me despite my refusal to play by his rules. When the door finally opened, apprehension gave way to anger. This had gone too far. Louis's games and the whole family's were too much. Perhaps I hadn't been ready before for more decisive action, but now things had changed. Armed with the video footage as evidence, I knew I had to act. That evening, I contacted a lawyer. While the thought of official legal proceedings against my own brother was unpleasant, I understood it was necessary. This was not just a matter of my right to private property. It was about finally stopping Louis and showing him that everything has consequences. The meeting with the lawyer boosted my confidence. He explained that I had every chance to protect my rights and ensure Louis received the deserved punishment for trespassing and vandalism. The next morning, as I prepared to file a police report, there was a knock on the door. It was Layla, her face full of concern, which was highly unusual for her. "Sarah, please, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. Against my desire to just slam the door in her face, I invited her in, knowing this might be a chance to hear something important. Layla didn't waste time on apologies. "I know about the door, and I know you know it was Louis," she began, avoiding my gaze. "But there's something else you should know." I was on alert. Layla rarely shared insights unless they concerned her own benefit. She looked at me as if preparing to reveal a big secret. Dad and Mom. Their will is not all it seems. Louis knows about documents that could change everything. Documents that could ruin the entire family legacy. I don't know the details, but... She paused, awaiting my reaction. My heart raced even faster. The true intentions of the family? All this drama was perhaps fueled by more than just self-interest. It was something much bigger. My determination to pursue Louis only grew stronger. If there were documents that could alter the family's fate, it was necessary to find out. I knew that from this moment, my life wouldn't be the same. I would have to deal not only with my bitter experience, but with mysteries hidden in the family's history. But if the family could hide such things from me, who else knew about them? And how far was I willing to go to shed light on the truth? And whom could I really trust now? Intrigue was swirling, and the game was taking a new turn. I was ready to rise to the challenge. Having received this information from Layla, I realized that I needed to act quickly and decisively. Forces I hadn't even suspected had entered the fray, and now it was important to understand how to benefit from it. First, I decided to review all the documents in my possession, all the old papers, letters, and property documents. Perhaps somewhere there lay a clue, something I might have overlooked earlier. A few years ago, when our father first mentioned the need to update his will, I hadn't paid enough attention, but perhaps that was when the seeds of this entire situation were sown. The next morning, I headed to the bank vault where my family kept some of their valuable papers. Inside, among a pile of old documents, I found a map, a layout of a small plot of land in a wooded area not far from our lake cottage. I'd never heard of us having land there before, but considering everything I was learning now, I shouldn't be surprised. This mysterious land could be the key to what was being so carefully concealed. I decided to go there. Looking around, I discovered that the plot was carefully hidden from view. A small wooden house stood there, almost entirely concealed among the trees. Cautiously entering, I discovered it looked more like a storage shed. Inside was an old box with documents, most of which were signed in the name of a company I had never heard of. Yet one name kept appearing: Agrisol. Agrisol was a well-known company, so it seemed my family had secret financial dealings, possibly far from ethical. This might explain why my parents were so protective of Louis and Layla, perhaps leaving them responsible for this surprise. Among the documents, I found papers confirming ownership of the land belonging to our family. This was more than I could have hoped for. I had a trump card that could turn the tide of their entire scheme. Returning home, I saw the late hour. I decided that the best way forward would be to act calmly and covertly, to involve my lawyer, and together figure out how to use what I had found to our greatest advantage. Although I knew unexpected twists lay ahead, all I could hope for was that I could outmaneuver everyone and protect myself from potential danger. The real game had begun, and it promised to be far more complex than I had anticipated. With the documents in hand and strategy in mind, I met with my lawyer again. A thorough analysis revealed that Agrisol had been using our plot for some biotechnology experiments. The project had apparently ceased years ago, but its impact on our family's financial standing was still palpable. Using the recovered documents as leverage, we devised a strategy. Our findings could not only settle my financial claims to the inheritance, but also restructure the management of family assets, freeing me from dependency and offering a chance to restore fairness. Understanding the importance of the evidence led to an unexpected meeting with Lewis. Initially, he was extremely hostile, as expected, but when I showed him the papers and explained the consequences, his confidence faltered. "What should I do?" he finally asked, dropping his smug demeanor. "Give me an honest share and a position in the family affairs, and I'll implement everything in a solid agreement," I offered. I knew that ordinary talks and squabbles wouldn't lead to peace, and only setting new rules could lay a foundation for a truce. The negotiations dragged on for a week, during which we all confronted the truth that family affairs depend on transparency and trust. The appearance of the documents cast a shadow on Layla and our parents, prompting them to reconsider their actions, but in the end, we reached a consensus. The story culminated on the day we signed a new agreement. The will was rewritten, accounting for all complexities and compromises, and I secured my rightful share in the family assets. I understood that trust was impossible to fully restore, but I had found my path through this maze. A few months later, in fall, when the leaves started to fall, I returned to that same plot in the forest. Standing on the freed land, under the boundless sky, I realized that the uncovered secrets had gifted me an unprecedented level of freedom and confidence. Now, I could build my own world where family ties and relationships were valued not by the money invested in them, but by sincerity in intentions and support. Though the journey had been arduous, I knew that at last, I could take as many steps forward as I wished, build my life free from complexes and expectations, guided by the intuition and belief that each day would be brighter, enriched by the experiences gained from this whole story. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.